morning we will continue our series on marriage. The title of the overall series is The Two Shall Become One, and the title this morning is Your Love is More Delightful Than Wine. And it shouldn't say song, because it's supposed to be Song of Solomon. That's my bad. But that's, Your Love is More Delightful Than Wine song. I wrote it, it goes, wine song, wine song. Okay, oh, whoa, yeah, you're right, Wyatt. I was making that up. You are amazing, Wyatt. So, a few comments. I spoke on this passage in the summer when we were in the book of Proverbs, because I'm going to be preaching out of Song of Solomon, chapter 1. And I thought, well, I talked about it, but it's really hard to talk about the rest of the book of the Song of Solomon if you haven't, kind of refreshed on chapter 1. So we're going to refresh there. Now, about the Song of Solomon, some of you are like, oh, he's not going to preach on that in church. I will be very family friendly. The thing about the Song of Solomon is that it is not in any way pornographic or dirty. It is some subject matter that you don't read about in the rest of the Bible. But the reason is because God made it. Like, He created Eve. He brought her to Adam. Love is His idea and everything that goes along with it. And we have sort of been deceived into thinking that it's not a good and holy and wonderful thing. It's become something that the world uses in all sorts of horrible ways, but that's not what it was intended, and it's not who owns it. It is God's. And this book in the Old Testament, interpreters throughout the ages have not known what to do with it because they're like, oh, what is this book about? It talks about kissing. And so what they decided, what the majority of the church throughout the centuries has decided, is that it's not about, love between a man and a woman. It's an allegorical relationship between Christ and the church, because there's no way God would be talking about the stuff that they talk about in the Song of Solomon. It has to be something else. Well, I firmly believe it's not. I mean, I'm not saying there aren't any allusions to Christ and the church, but it is about Solomon and his beloved. That's what it's about. And the first verse in the book says, Solomon's Song of Songs, because he wrote lots of songs, but this was his best song. There's no song he wrote that compares to this song. This is the love song. And that's a big deal, because you were created to be loved and in love. That's what you were created for. And it's not some strange concept. And again, in the world it's broken, and we are broken. In fact, Leonard Cohen, in his song Hallelujah, he wrote this line, I couldn't feel, so I learned to touch. And that's what the world that's what has happened in the world. We aren't able to feel, we aren't able to connect deeply. We don't know how to have healthy relationships. We don't know how to humble ourselves. And that's why we spent the last weeks on things like apologizing, on things like speaking the truth in love, on understanding the difference between being offended and taking offense, because all of those things get in the way of these deep, wonderful feelings. But you were created to be in love. Now, this doesn't mean that everyone should be married, and it doesn't mean that everyone will be married. In fact, the Apostle Paul said this, a married man has a lot of things to worry about. So if you can avoid it, please do. He says, remain single like me, because I just have to worry about myself and God. A married man, he has to worry about his wife and taking care of the family. And so, if you want to be single, then more power to you. But God created us to be in love. And here's this very first words of this chapter say, Solomon's Song of Songs. It's the best he has. And then verse 2 says, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is more delightful than wine. She is really in love. She's like, oh. And there is something exhilarating about being in love. It's like when you there's a guy and he sees a girl and he likes her and she comes over near him and he's like, I like your shoes. They're nice shoes. And he's like, what's wrong with me? My best line was, I like your shoes, because he's overcome with emotions. And it's just thrilling. And so here's this woman, and she's saying, this is how I feel. And I want to point this out. And I'm sure I pointed this out last time, but I'm going to also say new things, so it's not like a rerun. I was always taught that girls were always taught that boys are only interested in one thing. I'm not going to tell you what that is. You have to figure that out on your own. But that's what I was taught. Boys are only interested in one thing. And girls are like playing defense. Well, here she is. And she's the one who's saying, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. Now, they are not married yet. They get married in chapter 4, or the beginning of 5, in that area. By the way, I should have said this also. There's a couple of traditional ways that the book has been interpreted. The first one that I told you about was, this can't possibly be about real kissing, so it must be about Christ and the church. The second way is they came up with this love triangle, that there was the shepherd girl and the shepherd boy and Solomon. And Solomon is like big, rich king, and he just goes around taking any girls he wants because he's big King Solomon, and her heart really belongs to this shepherd boy, and it's this crazy, and I believe in just letting the text be the text. Let it tell you the story in its simplest form. And to me, this is pretty obviously about a girl that likes a boy and a boy that likes a girl. And I don't see any big bad guys trying to steal the girl away. So I will be reading this, explaining it from that interpretive position, that it's the story of a man and a woman and love. And so she says, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. And then she tells why. For your love is more delightful than wine. Because he loves her. She feels loved by him. And we're going to go on to read why she feels loved by him. The things that he is doing that make her feel love. That make her feel safe and secure. And although she's going to say some crazy things, she also says later, because they're not married yet, she says, promise me that you will not awaken love before it's time. Because she knew it wasn't time. So she has these feelings, and she's whipped up, but she also knows it's not time. So promise me you will not awaken love before it's time. So she says, your love. She's loved. Then she gives us a second reason why she wants to kiss him. Pleasing is the fragrance of your perfumes, because he smells good. And I think this is really interesting, because now science has all these studies about pheromones and how smell is actually much more important to women than it is to men. And she's like, oh, I love him. He loves me, and he smells so good. She doesn't talk about what he looks like. She talks about how he smells. And when I was a youth pastor, I used to tell my boys, because sometimes young men don't always smell that good, I would tell them, boys, you have to smell good. Like, you need to take showers and wear deodorant, and if you get some cologne, put some cologne on. And I would also tell them this, how you smell is more important than how you look, but you also have to look like you smell good. You can, no, but you know what I'm saying. You can't look like a slimy oil field and just put a little Dracar on and see like. So she says, your name is like perfume poured out. Now she's talking about his name. Well, what is a name? Well, Shakespeare said, a rose by that's what he wrote exactly. A rose by any other name is just as sweet. Because it really isn't the name. It's what the name represents. It's the character of this man. It's who he is. That when people hear his name, they're like, yeah, he's a good man. She's saying, he loves me, he smells good, and he's a good man. And one of the saddest things that I think people ever see, at least I see, is when there's a mismatched relationship where one person in it is a good person and another is a scoundrel. And when people they talk to her and they say, what do you see in him? He's a jerk. He's mean. And then she says, oh, but you don't know how sweet he is to me when we're alone. It's like, I don't care because I see what he's like. I know who he is. Well, that's not the case with this man. Everybody understood. No wonder the young women love you. His character was obvious and known. He's a good man. And then she says, take me away with you. Let us hurry. Let the king bring me into his chambers. We rejoice and delight in you. This is the friends now. We rejoice and delight in you. So she is saying, like, let's go to your chambers. Again, she doesn't want to awaken love before it's time. So that's why I think they're just going to make the bed or do some dusting or maybe folding or something like that. But she's like, oh, take me away. And then the friends say, we rejoice and delight in you. We will praise your love more than wine. How right they are to adore you, because she sees who he is and she knows what she has. And then she starts talking about herself. She says, dark am I, yet lovely. See, in this day, being dark meant you had to go out and work. You were a laborer. You weren't one of the elite who got to lay around and wear oil of Olay or whatever they did back then. She's like, I know that I'm pretty, but I don't look the way I wish I did. She says, I'm dark like the tents of Kedar, like the tent curtains of Solomon. Do not stare at me because I'm dark, because she's self-conscious. She's like, just don't look away. Stop it. Stop it. Don't look. My mother's sons were angry with me, and they made me take care of the vineyards. Her brothers were bullies, and instead of protecting her and watching over her, they misused her, and she had to go out and work. And she says, my own vineyard, talking about herself, I had to neglect. That's why. I don't want you to stare. And then she says, tell me, you whom I love, where you graze your flock and where you rest your sheep at midday. Because she wants to go see him, because she's in love, because his love is better than wine. He smells good. He takes care of her. He's a good man. She says, why should I be like a veiled woman beside the flocks of your friends? And a veiled woman is Hebrew poetry code for a lady of the night, which is also poetry code. But you understand what I'm talking about. She's like, I don't want anyone to see me wandering around the hills and mistake me. I don't want people to think bad things about me. She's asking him to protect her reputation, to protect her. And he says, if you do not know. See, so far she's done all the talking, her and her friends. And that's pretty common also, because they say that women talk more than men. I think they've even done studies on that. Paul, don't give me that look. And now he talks. And he's answering her question, how will I find you? And he says, if you do not know. And then he interrupts himself to say, most beautiful of women. He says, yeah, dark, whatever. You are the most beautiful of women. If you do not know, most beautiful of women, follow the tracks of the sheep and graze your young goats by the tents of the shepherds. Now that doesn't sound overly romantic, but here's what he just told her. Here's how you find me, and when you find me, I'm going to take care of you. See, she never asked for him to feed anything. And he told her, you bring your goats. I'm going to take care of you. And then, after he's told her that she's beautiful and where he is, and that he's going to feed her goats, he says, I liken you, my darling, to a mare among Pharaoh's chariot horses. Again, that might not sound overly romantic to you. You know, I mean, yeah, Mitchell, I wouldn't recommend on your first date saying, you look like a mare. You know, don't do it. Don't do it. However, what most interpreters think he's saying is, you imagine all the stallions of Egypt, and then a mare goes trotting out, and they're all like, woo! They're like, woo, we got to go. She's causing a stir. And he says, that's what you are like. I liken you to a mare among Pharaoh's chariot horses. So this is a rather poetic way to say, you are, yeah, you're it. And then he says, your cheeks are beautiful with earrings, and your neck with strings of jewels. These are more ways to tell her that she's beautiful. But not just like, yeah, you look pretty good. He's being specific. He's like, oh, your cheeks, they're beautiful. Your neck, it's beautiful. And it's interesting because, so Don Schroeder, who always sits in the back, but they're on a trip now, he and I were working with some youth kids about 20 years ago. And after the group, Don said something like, and I don't remember the names, but he was like, Billy's got it for Annie. And I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, little Billy. He likes Annie. I'm like, how do you know that? He goes, I know. No, how do you know that? I know. For real. How do you know that? He goes, I'm old. I'm like, okay. Then he says, the eye has a way of finding what the heart desires. Because he was watching little Billy always like, look, is Annie looking at me? Oh, you know. And he's like, I see you. I see your cheeks. I see your neck. And then he says what might be the most romantic line of all. We will make you earrings of gold studded with silver. And you say, well, what is so romantic about that? Well, again, you have to put yourself 3,000 years ago in reading Hebrew poetry. That was like old school code for, I'm taking you shopping. We're going to get you. Yeah. He's like, oh, yeah. You are the most beautiful of women. You're like a mare among Pharaoh's chariots. Your neck is beautiful. Your cheeks are beautiful. I'm going to feed your goats, and we're going shopping. Now, she is having a transformation because she's being loved. She's feeling loved. She's cared for. See, there's a lady who wrote a book, and I forget her name. It's like Rebecca Johnson or something. And the name of the book was Do You Think I'm Beautiful? It was written like in the late 90s, early 2000s when John Eldridge was on this, all these books about men like Sacred Romance and The Journey of Desire and like reclaiming masculinity. And so she wrote this book basically reclaiming femininity. And I only read the inside cover because, I'm not too interested in being more feminine. But this is what she said. There is a question that is at the core of every woman's heart. It's there from the time she's born, the first time she puts on her mom's clothes and puts on her makeup and spins around in her mom's shoes and has her dad watching her dance. And the question is, do you think I'm beautiful? That's the question. And women learn that they are not. And it doesn't even mean it's true. It just means it's what they learn. They learn it from magazines. They learn it from TV. They learn it from mean kids. They learn it from themselves. They learn it from their sisters. They just learn, you know what? I will never measure up. Because if that's what beauty is, that's not me. And so they just sort of learn to settle for other things. I want to be efficient. I want to be a hard worker. I want to be a great baker. I want to be a dependable and loyal friend. I want to be a great crafter. Whatever things that are, but that question of, do you think I'm beautiful, is too painful. So they bury it. And here is Solomon saying over and over and over. I mean, think about their percentage of words. Her words have been about herself. And that's a beautiful thing, because you know what she brought? She brought her own vulnerability. She shared with him how she really feels and what she really thinks and why and what her brothers did. He hasn't said anything about himself. All he said is, you're beautiful in 5 or 6 different ways. I'll feed your goats and we're going shopping. It's about her. But now we get to verse 12, and look at the transformation that has happened in these first 11 verses. While the king was at his table, my perfume spread its fragrance. So you have the king, and he's like, whatever kings are doing. Maybe he's having dinner, maybe he's like, reading the Magna Carta. We don't know. But the king is at the table. They're not together. While the king was at his table, my perfume spread its fragrance. My beloved is to me a sachet of myrrh resting between my breasts. My beloved is to me a cluster of henna blossoms from the vineyards of En-Gedi. And you're saying, what does any of that mean? It's Hebrew poetry for this. He may be the king, but he smelled my perfume, and he's putty in my hands. He wants me. Do you see how different that is than dark am I yet lovely? Because she has been loved and transformed. And men and women are different. I mean, I know that seems like a silly thing to say, but it's true. They're different. They're biologically different. They're chemically different. They're hormonally different. They're chromosomally different. They're different. And they have different needs and different desires and different wants. And like when my kids were little, my daughter, this is how she would play. Like she would have her friends and they would dress up in their dresses and they would have tea parties. And sometimes I would get to go to the tea parties. And it was a good time because we would drink imaginary tea with imaginary milk and imaginary sugar. And we'd talk about imaginary things. And then they say, oh, I love your outfit. Where did you? Oh, it was on sale at Marshall's. It's so beautiful. And then this is how my son played. That's the lightsaber noise.